about the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles.
Well, it was such a high moment, I would say, consciousness-wise, for me.
Right.
It was our opportunity to talk about some of the new developments on our world, our planet, in a spiritual way, and its progressive evolution to the future. So a lot of the discussion was around science, the future science that's emerging, and how it's combined with spirit. The joining of science and spirit is what I like to call it.
Right. Excellent. Now, tell us about your segment in a wonderful documentary titled All About Tesla. Now, you starred in that.
Nikola Tesla is a great example of a person who's connected to their higher self.
Right.
And it's the future of planet Earth for people like you and I to learn how to connect and build up our higher self. Now, Tesla had an extremely developed higher self that he'd been working on many, many, many hundreds of lifetimes. So that's our future. That's the opportunity that Unarius is teaching us how to do that.
Right. And in that interview, that documentary, you state that there is hope for planet Earth, and you refer to the Tesla Power Tower. And for those who don't know who Nikola Tesla is, he's basically the father of electrical engineering, a Serbian-American inventor best known for discovering alternating current and electrical supply system. Right, Dave?
Yes. Not only that, he went on to discover other principles about physics, about energy, and he eventually figured out that we could have wireless transmission of energy or electrical power. We can distribute it all around the world, and once you understand frequency and vibration, this can be done. We can get rid of all the wires that we string up everywhere.
Right.
And they're so unsightly, and they're very dangerous when a tornado comes along or a hurricane. Everybody is going to have to deal with a loss of power or some kind of electrocution.
Right.
So I go on to say that in Atlantis we had the very same technology, and that technology of Atlantis is slowly coming back into our physics.
Right. Now, I talked about electrical supply system, and basically to put it in a way that people could easily grasp out there, frequency, basically electrical currents, you may see these frequencies that Nikola Tesla that he engineered in Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, right? When Dr. Frankenstein's working on Frankenstein, you see the machines around him that have those low electro wave frequencies, right?
Right, the high frequency. This is what Tesla went on to discover, is the ability to step up electrical energy to a high frequency. Right. And like Carlos, those science fiction movies, you can see the Tesla coil put out all these Tesla or lightning bolts, artificial.
Right.
And most of the time when you do a search on the Internet for Nikola Tesla, you'll find those Tesla coils and all kinds of ways to build them. We go much further than that. In fact, we describe how this Tesla coil was a part of his future development, where we will one day in the future build one power tower named in honor of his visit to us, Nikola Tesla Power Tower, and it will supply the entire world with free electrical energy. Now, I won't be, you have to pay for a building of the tower and the infrastructure, but it will be free of pollutants and any danger to mankind.
Wow. That's amazing.
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that a great future to look forward to?
That's absolutely wonderful. Now, I also wanted to ask you, Tesla's work, it really fell into relative obscurity until the early 90s, when you saw a resurgence, an interest in his work once again, and his theories became popular culture. Now, what do you say about ionospheric research and the fact that this direct heating of the ionosphere, the ionosphere being the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere? Now, this was all basically reverse engineered by Russian scientists, and since 1991, it has been taken over by the U.S., and we know it now as HAARP, the Hyperactive Auroral Research Program located in Alaska. Now, HAARP is, I believe HAARP is directly influenced by Tesla technology, those ELF waves, correct?
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Okay.
See, the problem is when you have such advanced technology coming into our world, people might tend to misuse it and use it for power over other people.
Right.
To modify weather, to do all kinds of things that normally if a person who's spiritually motivated would not do.
Right.
So that was one of the problems that Tesla ran into, is this future technology. He envisioned in his mind, how do we evolve the people who are going to be using it in the future? Do we want to see a complete misuse of that technology? No, we don't. So what do we do about it? So that's why Unarius is here.
Excellent. You really see that great power falling into evil hands.
Well, I don't know. I'm not there. I've never gone up there and look at them, but
right.
You know, due to the second-hand or third-hand or whatever reports, we can deduce that it may not be in the proper hands. But that's temporary. That the future for planet Earth is positive because we have a new age coming in, and it's desperately needed.
Absolutely.
That means that the thinkers like you and I, the researchers, the technicians, the scientists, they will be able to see how the universe operates and begin to use that technology for positive purposes.
Absolutely. Now, also, Dave, in the documentary all about Tesla, it also features Dr. Michio Kaku, and basically wanted to ask you what your thoughts were regarding the God particle theory, and where they refer to a Higgs life particle explosion. What are your thoughts on that?
It's going in the wrong direction.
Okay.
It's physics that is not really taking us forward, because there's no such thing as a God particle.
Right.
The parent forces that control mass and energy are in another dimension, and they're in much more, let's put it, higher frequency dimensions, commonly called the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and our technology hasn't gotten there yet. So there's some kind of phobia, Bruce, about discussing physics that takes place in the fourth dimension, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. There's some kind of barrier that people will not go over because they don't have the devices to measure it. So we have great people like Michio Kaku, who has theorized with others string theory, and they propose that there are higher dimensions, and the physics that takes place in those dimensions are completely different than what we know about. We call them Newtonian or Einstein physics. One day, Bruce, we'll all look back over this and we'll laugh at the primitive understanding of the God particle.
Right.
There's no such thing as mass. It's an illusion. The whole world, the universe that you and I live from life to life and reincarnation and our evolution is energy.
Right.
And Einstein really nailed it. He's, mass is really could be looked at as energy.
Right. Absolutely. Now, I wanted to ask you about what you guys refer to it as a cosmic field of intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And, well, I wanted to ask you about the founders of Unarius also, which stands for Universal Articulate Interdimensional Understanding of Science.
Correct. Or the Science of Life is the subtitle, which is, I guess, more easily understandable.
Right. Now, really, it was brought to the masses and even the mainstream media with appearances by some of your founders on the David Letterman show and so on. Can you tell our listening audience about Unarius's founders, Ernest Norman and Ruth Norman?
Well, do you have an hour?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Ruth Norman and her husband, Ernest Norman, were two very advanced spiritual beings, and they incarnated here. They had a very developed higher self, and Ernest Norman had envisioned this foundation called Unarius, and with his wife, they met in 1954. When they got together, they realized their purpose was to create this new spiritual foundation to help clarify what the heck spirit is.
Right.
What is it? What is heaven like? So Ernest Norman, from a very, very early age, or a child, was a child prodigy. And he was very scientifically gifted, or biased toward the sciences, and he was clairvoyant. So he had this incredible ability to tune into his higher self and those higher dimensions and those advanced beings who live on those dimensions, who since graduated from planet Earth, or planets like planet Earth, and he was overshadowed by the same consciousness that Jesus of Nazareth was overshadowed with. So they are two cosmic visionaries. We could go through the history of who's who in the encyclopedias, and you'll find that these two individuals lived some great spiritual and progressive lives. So they set up Unarius as a way to re-explain some of the spiritual principles that had become distorted over the centuries.
Right.
Now, the teachings of Jesus are very scientific. And Ernest Norman was when he was here on the earth, was a very scientific person. And so several of his books were transmitted from his higher self through clairvoyant attunement. And some of those principles that Jesus taught are completely re-explained with today's science. Right. For example, I'll take one of them. The fall of the sparrow is also noted, means that everything is connected through the energy principle of regeneration and harmonic oscillation.
Right.
So, what harmonics is. Radios are involved with oscillations of frequencies. Mm-hmm. So, imagine, that the radio works on a receiver-transmitter relationship, right?
Right.
Same thing as TV. So when Jesus described the Father, he meant the infinite intelligence was in the higher dimensions, and that we are the receivers.
Right.
And so when he said the fall of the sparrow is also noted, that means energy-wise, this is all one great oneness.
Right.
So he went on to describe scientifically how to properly understand these principles, because that's what it is to understand energy. To understand God is to understand energy. Energy oscillates at specific frequencies, and they have harmonics. So for every frequency that's broadcast, there are harmonics, and that's the true way to understand the universe and the principles of spirit.
Right.
Now, for example, Buddha taught about possessing material things. So when people go around with money and they overspend and they possess many different things, mm-hmm. they become attuned in their consciousness. They become attuned to their material possessions. And
right.
So eventually it takes them over, and whatever effort they've made to contact their higher self, to fan that spiritual part of them, goes by the wayside. And, they've warned us about this time and time again. It's not to become materialistic.
Right.
So unfortunately, we're going through a very materialistic phase. But right now, you and I are seeing planet Earth go through a big transition age.
Yes.
We're now making our transition into a new age. So Ruth Norman, his wife, lived the life of Buddha. Mm-hmm. And Buddha was all about love and compassion and non-possessiveness.
Right.
And so when these two cosmic visionaries came together, wow, there was a complete joining of their spiritual mission. And so when Ernest Norman went back to his spiritual planet, or so-called died in 1971, Ruth Norman, his wife, took over the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And so she began to contact her higher self and made the teachings of Unarius more viable.
Right.
So one of the most important things that was originally part of Jesus' teachings was completely omitted later on, centuries later, and that was the idea that we've all lived past lives.
Right.
And this is all documented, I believe, in the Council of Nicaea.
Mm-hmm.
I said the word right. This is all documented, and that's one of many distortions that have arrived today as a result of trying to understand what Jesus taught. So Jesus taught the idea that we have lived before, and we have lived many lives, and we will have future lives too. So we should pay attention to which part of us we're feeding.
Absolutely.
The lamb part of us or the lion part of us.
Right.
Now, if we stop feeding the lion part of us, the animalistic part of us, we will start to phase out war and treat each other as brothers instead of enemies.
Right.
If we continually feed the lion part of us, that means we become more, cynical.
Right.
Toward everything, toward our government, each other, and we don't have that love and compassion that we should develop.
Right.
So that's a short history of Ernest Norman and Ruth Norman.
Oh, that was excellent. Also, we speak about my personal Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, also known as Yeshua. Also, I got a chance to speak with Giorgio Sacol of Ancient Aliens, and he stated that there's a part in the Bible that it jumps from Jesus' childhood to him being a 30-year-old man. What happened in the middle? And
see, that's the part that Unarius re-explains as to what happened.
Right. And they state that he may have traveled to Nepal, India, and learned those Buddhist-type teachings there in his travels.
He did. He went to India, he visited Tibet, what is now known as Tibet and Nepal, and he contacted several wise men. And when he came back to Jerusalem, or that part, Judea, to carry out the mission, he was met with great opposition, and the story as well as I did. He never got to continue his mission.
Right. Truly tragic story indeed, but I would like to have him in my heart as a happy person, which is what he was, a great teacher, a person who was here to inspire good and not fear, right?
Right. Exactly. He even warned people, if you become too fearful, you attract that energy to yourself. Again, we're talking about energy.
Right.
See, the thing, if you study the works of Nikola Tesla, he was not a fearful person.
Mm-hmm.
When Edison challenged him and tried to destroy alternating current, Tesla had this developed love and compassion, and he went around them and developed a new technology and proved by giving lectures and demonstrations that his technology of alternating current was superior. But he personally did not hate Edison.
Right.
So that's what we have to learn, how to give up that hate and resentment toward each other and start to treat each other as brothers and sisters. Well, how do you do that? Well, Unarius shows you that the many different negative past lives are standing in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are a family member or is having great resentment toward each other, you can believe that this resentment or negative energy you're just carrying over from life to life.
Wow.
And we teach you how to find out what's the past life that's involved. And if you killed each other in a previous life, let's say Rome, then you probably will come back together as a family member to balance that equation out.
Right.
So most of the people on planet Earth have no idea what their past lives are like, And the problem is it's their negative past lives which will influence them the most.
Wow.
You see? And this is what you see going on and on and on and on. This world is kind of crazy right now. And it's because people do not know how to embrace the positive part of themselves. They allow the negative, as Jesus said, the lion to dominate their consciousness. So one of our techniques is to keep a journal.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, if you want, write in your journal. Stick a probe into your consciousness. Were you short with someone?
Mm-hmm.
Did you react negatively to somebody who cut you off in the freeway? My hand is up right now, by the way.
All the time.
So you don't go home and beat yourself. You simply change your consciousness to say, yes, I gave into that.
Right.
You
Absolutely.
see, you don't beat yourself because just adding negative energy on top of negative energy. So this is what Unarius teaches, past life therapy. And you can use it if you need if you're without a job and you find yourself, needing a career, a job, or you need financial help, relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend. It doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
The problems occur because of the negative past lives, and that will affect individuals more. You see, the positive lives, Bruce, take care of themselves. We don't need to really dwell on that, because if we do, our ego gets a hold of it.
Right. Wow.
And this world doesn't need much more ego.
Oh, it certainly doesn't. Now, moving forward, I wanted to ask you about, basically, you basically said it for me. Unarius believes in the immortality of the soul. And
correct.
Basically, can you explain to our listening audience also how some have tried to label the group as a religion, something that the founder, Ernest Norman, opposed, saying that Unarius and its content and activities, it's basically teaching interdimensional science, as you stated, and many of the principles of the group are that everything is energy, as we've already stated, and energy is never created or destroyed. It merely changes form.
Mm-hmm.
And also that we as humans have lived past lives, and basically elaborate this to our audience.
Well, the fact that we have another anatomy, okay, you and I know that we're in the physical,
right,
and that we had a beginning to that cycle called birth, and that's just a cycle that will end, so-called death. So what about the other side of life? Well, this is where Unarius describes exactly what the spirit nature of ourselves is. So we have a completely different anatomy that is immortal. It lives in a completely spiritual dimension, and it's called the psychic body or the spiritual body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whenever we have, let's say we're an artist in a life, and we devote our life, most of our life to being creative, being helpful, being positive, being a painter, to inspire, to live out that inspiration, and to let it come through our brush or whatever. So that goes to a part of our psychic anatomy that's much more positive,
right,
called the higher self. Now, that psychic anatomy also has a lower part to it that contains a lot of negative vibrations, which originate from many different earth lives, or this life, or Rome, or Greece, or Mesopotamia, or whatever the negative lives have been. They are stored in another anatomy called the spiritual anatomy or the psychic anatomy.
Right.
So when we reincarnate, all those energies from our psychic body are now influencing us in a brand new body.
Right.
And if you have evolved your spirit nature to be very developed, then you will come back as a child prodigy like Mozart, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So our whole being is really spirit. What we call our physical is just a temporary phase of that. So if we look into our psychic or spiritual body, we can find out exactly what it's made of, does it do, how to reach it. And this is where Unarius has much information on that. So when we have a distress that comes along, a disease, a headache, whatever it is, what we do is we know that energy is coming from our immortal self.
Right.
And we work with it. We recognize it. And with the principles of recognition, we create an out-of-phase waveform. And it's sent back into the psychic body to cancel out that energy. So our true nature is energy, it's spirit, and it can be defined scientifically.
Right.
Now, there's basically three different parts of the psychic body, or our soul. And those are all differentiated from each other by frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing in radio. Same thing in TV. So our spirit nature that follows us from life to life, that it lives immortally, can be understood scientifically as an expression of interdimensional energy. It's not defined just to one dimension, Bruce. It works with multiple dimensions.
Right.
And as you evolve in your soulic nature, life after life, you will find that the psychic body is able to communicate with higher dimensions. So when you lose the physical and so-called death, you get to ascend and graduate to a higher teaching plane.
Higher level of being, right?
Exactly. This is what Jesus came to explain.
Right.
That his world was not of planet Earth. His true world, the world that he came from, was a completely different nature. It was positive, it was peaceful, it was passive, and it was all about exploring that vital positive nature of ourselves. You know as well as anybody else the power of positive thinking.
Absolutely.
This is what Jesus came to demonstrate, what it will do for you if you believe it. So that was 2,000 years ago. Now we have Unarius to explain all this great power behind your positive spirit nature.
Right. Absolutely wonderful. Now, Dave, can you tell us about some of the new, remarkable new discoveries as of late concerning the discovering of extrasolar planets?
Yes. That is one of my favorites since I was a amateur astronomer as a teenager.
Right.
Now, the fact 10 years ago or 20 years ago, when you and I sat down to have a conversation about the probability of life in other solar systems, that they probably have human life, would not be very scientifically based. It would be just based on your, belief.
Right.
So because of the Kepler probe and others, satellites, we now have definite scientific evidence that there are planets and other solar systems that probably have the ability to have the kind of life that we have here, planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So that means we've evolved from a completely faith-based discussion to one scientifically biased.
Right.
So you can now discuss and argue the fact that we are not alone in the universe, and you can have scientific evidence to back you up. So look down the road, future 10 years from now, they will fine-tune this research, and they will probably identify planets that have a high probability that they have the same conditions that planet Earth has for life, to supporting intelligent human beings.
Right.
Not just microbes, intelligent, evolving human beings, whatever they look like, they have a soulic nature.
Right.
And so this is the thing that Unarius offers, Bruce, is how to keep all that scientific research biased toward our spirit nature, rather than just a scientific fact that, yeah, we have evidence, so what? I mean, it's just physics, you see. So that's why one of my favorite subjects is the joining of science and spirit.
Right.
In other words, there are brothers and sisters on other worlds.
Right. And it is pretty naive for a man to think he's truly alone in such a vast what we know as the universe. I mean, it's so grandiose. I mean, how can we be the only life forms? Correct.
And 20 years ago, people argued, well, what was all that space out there created for? Right. What were all those suns and planets and galaxies created for? And everybody just go, I don't know. So you see how we're evolving scientifically.
Right. Absolutely. Now, Dave, I got a chance to talk to you and meet with you at like I stated earlier, the 11th annual Conscious Life Expo here in Los Angeles. It's truly wonderful. I mean, so many great speakers, and I got a chance to talk to you and attend that lecture that was hosted by George Norrie of Coast to Coast AM. But can you tell our listening audience about the other lecture that you had the next day regarding Tesla technology?
Yes. This is something we give on a regular basis. The next day we gave a lecture demonstration on the Tesla technology, the joining of science and spirit, but I think this year we called it Opening a Cosmic Window.
Right.
So, and this is what the Tesla physics is exactly in tune with Ernest Norman and what Unarius has to say.
Mm-hmm.
See? That's why they're the same. So, or similar, based on the similar frequencies of energy. So, now, what we do is we talk about the future development of Tesla technology is far superior than exploding the uranium atom to derive energy from the atom.
Right.
It's a step that we had to go through, but it's a very negative step that we're going to have to learn the lesson the hard way. This is another principle of spirit. There are many different lessons to learn. Nobody can learn them for you.
Right.
You have to learn them through experience. So planet Earth is learning a very negative lesson, if you ask me and Unarius, about exploding atoms to derive energy from them. You started with the atomic bomb, and rather than realize that the energy that's feeding into an atom is vortexual energy coming from the higher dimensions, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, etc.
Right.
So if we could learn to tune into those energies, like a radio, we could extract from the cosmos plenty of energy. Now, physics went down the wrong road, another road where they smash things together, Bruce, to get anything out of it.
Right.
It's beneficial. So what they did is they disrupted the atom from its higher self, its inner connection.
Right.
So when they did that, they disrupted the continuity between that atom or molecule and its corollary interdimensional vortexual structure. And when they did that, in the atom bomb, all that force came in to our world in one blinding negative flash.
Right.
Now, they learned to do it through nuclear generation stations slowly, but they don't realize some very important interdimensional physics. And that is that there is a bleed-off, a side effect that is putting out negative frequencies that we can only measure the lower harmonic.
Mm-hmm.
We call it radiation. People get sick from it. It breaks down containers that they make.
Mm-hmm.
It breaks it down. And it's because of the negative involvement with what they're doing to the atom. Like I said, there is a harmonic or a side effect that's broadcast out. And unless you understand Unarius or you're clairvoyant, you don't know this.
Mm-hmm.
So the containers that they store the nuclear rods in, they're going to eventually break down for the same reason.
Right.
They can't store it anywhere. Eventually, it'll bleed out and it will poison planet Earth.
Wow.
Now,
right.
And like I said, the people who manage these things lie to the public. They cover up. And Fukushima, we haven't seen the end of it yet.
Exactly.
And there's very devastating radiation, and when they understand how atoms function. Let me make a simple analogy, may I?
Well, of course.
Okay. Now, when you listen to the radio, you know there's not people on that radio. You know that through science, through understanding. The people are in a studio, and that energy is being broadcast through a transmitter, correct?
Correct.
Or the Internet. Now, people need to learn that when they see an atom pulsating its energy, whether you call it carbon, uranium, hydrogen, whatever you call it, it's energy coming from the transmitter, which is its counterpart in another dimension. So can you envision that? Well, that might be a challenge, but it's the same analogy.
Right.
When people get used to the radio after years and years, then when a primitive looks at it and oh, you mean there's people in that little box? Of course not.
Right.
Of course not. So the same thing, the atom is simply a transducer of energy that's coming from another dimension.
Right.
So when we understand that, we will safeguard how we treat atoms, how we treat the universe, how we treat planet Earth. Right. We will begin to learn to treat it with the utmost care.
Right.
And not pollute this planet anymore.
Absolutely, Dave. And I wanted to touch up on the atom bomb. Now, Arthur von Braun stated, a person who's directly involved in the creating of the atom bomb, he stated that we would not have had that technology if it wouldn't have been for an otherworldly help. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Right. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it was not exactly from the very highest level. When we talk about otherworldly help, what dimension are you talking about? The very highest spiritual nature that Tesla was in tune with, or other lesser nature? Now, I don't know for sure, Bruce, but it might be that in order to defeat the Japanese, we had no choice. We had to do that. So the way that Unarius looks at all this stuff is there's a positive and a negative to everything. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, the atom bomb is a very positive use of science and understanding of how Einstein's energy principle was put to use. On the negative side, look at what's happening.
Right.
So the otherworldly influence probably was positive in some respects, and it wasn't the most highest developed nature. But look at the physics of Tesla. He already argued with Einstein and others that you do not need to smash atoms together to derive plenty of electrical energy from them. You don't need to do that.
Right.
He said, look, I have the ability with Tesla, magnifying transmitter or whatever, frequency, understanding energy and other frequency domains, to bring energy in, and we can transmit it from from a power generating station to other parts of the planet. But did physics listen to him? No, they didn't. So there was free will. Physics went down the wrong road. Well, maybe it was a lesson that has to be learned.
Right.
So just because we see otherworldly influence doesn't mean it came from the very highest.
Right. I got
So I believe that the incarnation of Nikola Tesla was purposely designed and timed to help steer mankind away from the negative use of exploding the atom. Did we listen to him? No. Did we listen to Jesus? Totally, in order to learn how to live in harmony and with positive energies? Right. No. If we did, we wouldn't have wars. We wouldn't treat each other as enemies.
Absolutely right. Now, you couldn't be any more righter. Now, the Unarius Academy of Science was featured in the Huffington Post in an article titled "Unarius UFO Group Celebrates Interplanetary Conclave of Light, October 15th through 16th." Now, Dave, can you tell our listening audience about that article? Absolutely.
Now, this was yet another celebration where we come together usually the second weekend of October, to celebrate the fact that we're not alone in the universe. And in the future, sometime in the future, in the new age, we will be contacted in a more direct way by these other planets who are evolving into their new age, and some have already done that. So imagine the United Nations, working.
I'd rather not.
Imagine the United Nations working in the way that it was supposed to.
Right.
Where one country like the Congo or Canada or Italy has problems, the rest of the world's resources would be focused on helping that one individual or country or Italy or Spain or whoever needed the help, right? Now, it didn't come out that way, but eventually, give it time. Give it an evolution of time, and you'll see the United Nations will probably one day function that way. So now let's expand our vision to the rest of the Milky Way galaxy. There is a confederation of other planets. There's 32 other ones, including planet Earth. The planet Earth is the 33rd member. One day, we will be joining this interplanetary confederation.
Right.
So, again, when one planet needs help, like planet Earth needs a lot of help, then the rest of the planets in this confederation will be able to point their resources, provide their positive resources in helping, rather than war on each other. So, this is a very positive spiritual movement. So, we've already been contacted by them telepathically. In 1972 and 3, Ruth Norman sat down telepathically with 2 subchannels, received incredible communications with other planets. Wow. Now, let's assume that you, a truth seeker, would like to find out more specific information about life on other worlds.
Right.
Are they human? Do they believe in Jesus? Do they believe in a spirit? Has Jesus ever visited their planet? So those are all very good questions one would have, correct?
Correct.
So we now have all those communications that came through Ruth Norman's higher self on digital, CD or MP3. And you could put in, let's say, the planet Vixal, which is very scientific. It's in the Pleiades constellation. You could pop that into your player, and you could sit there and listen to the dialogue between Ruth Norman and the situation that planet Vixal had. Mm-hmm. And then you would sit there like, and listen like a fly on the wall to this incredible conversation.
Right.
So Ruth Norman was so in tune with spiritual principles, she explained to them that they were headed down the wrong road. Okay?
Right.
So they had developed robots, and so smart, so sophisticated, that when you looked at one of these robots, they call them electrodes, by the way, you couldn't tell the difference between them and a human being. You could not. But the only time that you as a human being ever saw anything like that was on science fiction or Star Trek or whatever, right?
Right.
All right. Now, what happened was, on this planet, it was very scientific. They had gone down the scientific road to a point where they omitted spirit. They left it out.
Right.
See, and they did not know this, but they were headed for their own demise, their own destruction, because the robots had outnumbered the human beings 2/3 to 1/3. 2/3 of the planet population were artificial robots. And unknowingly, they were planning to get rid of all the humans.
Wow.
That's right.
Sounds like something out of Terminator Salvation, man.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can sit there and listen to this exchange, and the planet leader was named Donatus, and he had this spiritual development to a certain extent, and he was open-minded to Ruth Norman. By the way, we call her Uriel, Archangel Uriel, by her higher self's name.
Right.
And she explained to him that you have created such an extraordinary scientific civilization that as human beings you don't have to do anything except sit there and meditate on your navel.
Wow.
So she says you've gone down the wrong road. In order to evolve spiritually, you don't completely remove everything from human beings, allowing them to do nothing and allowing them only to push a button and it will technologically appear, whatever.
Right.
So this is an incredible, scenario that went on for thousands of years, and it got to the point where Ruth Norman was inspired by her higher self to warn them. And what happened was the Nanas listened to her, and they shut off most of these robots or electrodes and reprogrammed to be of a lesser nature.
Wow.
So, you can sit there and listen to this. This is the beauty of this interplanetary confederation that we celebrate every October.
Truly amazing, truly wonderful. Now, Dave, unfortunately, we are out of time, but can you let our listening audience know where they could find out more about you and the Unarius Academy of Science?
Yes, it's Unarius, UNARIUS.org. That's the website. Let me give you the toll-free number in case you want to call. 800-475-7062.
Excellent.
Now, I'm not the managing director of Unarius. I'm just a student here.
Oh.
Somehow that was a mistake that got in there.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I'm
part of the board of directors, and last year I was the president of the board of directors.
Right.
So every year we rename a new one. So I'm not there. I'm not the president of the board anymore.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you corrected that, and I'm glad you decided to be on our show. It was great meeting you at the Conscious Life Expo. It was even greater having you on my own show, on my own broadcast. Thank you so much, Mr. Reynolds, for being on today.